Hello, welcome to Taking Flight, building worlds, building businesses, life inside an indie game studio. My name is Ryan Keitlin. I'm the program director of the Innovation Entrepreneurship Master of Science degree here at Full Sail. And I'm joined today by two incredibly talented and experiencing gaming professionals to discuss what it really takes to launch your own indie game business and to keep it running. In this episode, we will pull back the curtain on the challenges, the creativity, and the chaos of independent game development. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce the panelists today. In studio with me is Chris Keeling. Hi, Chris. Chris has been part of the gaming industry since 1998, working on successful video games like Panzer Elite, Soldier, American Army, Order of War, World of Tanks, World of Warplanes, World of Warships, Master of Orion, and Stars Reach. He has held positions in design, including narrative designer, system designer, and scenario designer. And in production as senior producer, production director, executive producer, product director, and studio director. It's a lot of positions. 2 years ago, he started his own studio, Mars Games, with several equally experienced friends to introduce a new kind of free-to-play PC console blender shooter game. He currently teaches in the Game Design Master's program at Full Sail and previously served as the program manager for the Game Design Bachelor of Science program.
Thanks, Ryan.
All right. And now joining us via Zoom is Alexia Mandeville. Alexia is a game designer who has been working at the intersection of games and technology, including augmented reality, virtual reality, and location-based mobile games. Mandeville got her Master's of Science in Modeling and Simulation with a focus on designing location-based games. She spent her early career designing serious games and simulations and has worked on augmented and virtual reality platforms and games at multiple companies, including Oculus, Meta, and Niantic. Since then, she's published Chief Emoji Officer and Grift, Sam Tycoon, with the indie studio she co-founded, Bodaville. She's the author of Video Game Design for Dummies, published by Wiley, and in her spare time, she enjoys yoga and driving her 79 Beetle. Thanks, Alexia. All right, fantastic. Well, guys, this is such an interesting topic for me, being in entrepreneurship. I don't have a gaming background, so I'm here to learn just as much as everyone's here today. I want to start with something that I think is pretty prevalent when you think about the gaming industry, is the creative side. And how is that balanced with the commercial side? So, Chris, I'm going to start with you. And I just want to know what kind of balance between pursuing your creative vision and ensuring that your game is commercially viable?
Well, Ryan, the best game in the world isn't going to be successful if you can't sell it. So business is very important. It's often overlooked. You've got to do a lot of research before you create a game. You can't just have a great idea. You have to think about the business side. You have to get investors. You have to get a publisher. You have to coordinate with others to get this done. You have to be persistent, passionate, and have product. And that product has to be proven to be viable, whether it's through market analysis, research surveys, market studies. But to be able to do that and then build some kind of demo that you can test and show that it's a fully functional and fun game that people will want to play. It's really hard in the current market to get that funding. So it's pretty essential to balance those things. It has to be fun, sure, but it also has to be very easily approachable. It has to be a good fit, product market fit for your target audience, and that target audience has to be willing to accept it.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Alexia, kind of the same kind of question, with your company, how have you balanced that creative side of the vision and then, looking at it from a more business aspect of becoming viable?
Yeah, so for our company, we decided to bootstrap and we were not going for funding on our first few games. Our strategy was to make small games over the period of 4 months to 5 months to 6 months and just continuously making smaller ones to see which ones would pick up the most traction. As far as just striking a balance between the creative and commercially viable, the same that Ryan said, was just having, oh, not Ryan, sorry, Chris. Chris said, just researching a lot and making sure that you're playtesting early and often to make sure that people are interested in it, and also just thinking about your monetization strategy early so that you are understanding if you're going to go with a premium model, free to play, etc.
No, no, that's fascinating, and it's interesting to me that that is so much related to, I think, any type of entertainment business, where your passion is colliding with the realities of a day-to-day business operation. And Lexi, I kind of want to keep going with that about when you're allocating your resources between the creative development, but like the day-to-day, the getting the business done. What goes into those considerations when you're putting plans together, and from your perspective?
Yeah, so we have the smallest shop in the world. We have two main people, and then we would hire based on the needs of the game. So, for instance, for Grift Scam Tycoon, we had me and Bo, my business partner, and we knew that we needed a lot of art resources. So, we brought on a character artist and also marketing for a bootstrapped endeavor because we don't have a publisher. We don't have a full team of people working on getting streamers to play it or doing trailers. I was doing 1 hour of development time and then having 1 hour of marketing. So then we hired another person to help with social media because I also needed to focus on the design and implementing the UI and such. So obviously, being on a much larger team, it's very different, but just a smaller team, you wear a lot of hats and you need to scale up and be really precious with your time. Scale up where you can and get other people to help and hire for more resources.
That's that's interesting. I think the community approach, and that's something I want to dive into a little bit later about the village and the community around gaming, which I have been introduced to, and I think that's a fascinating aspect of what you guys bring to the table. Um, Chris, in your initial response about striking that budget and the creative vision, you mentioned some of the basic building blocks of the legal and financial structures, and just around the IP and everything. Can you dive just a little bit into the stuff that I don't think a lot of people think about when they're developing businesses? And this is true in our programs as well. And I don't care if you're starting a independent game studio, or you're starting even a small ice cream shop. Some of these things that you might be passionate about, that you don't think about the nuts and bolts of those other issues.
There's a lot to it. Like Alexia said, she has to wear a lot of hats. And that's because it's not just the individual contributors, the ICs, we usually say, like the artists and engineers and designers. You've got producers, you've got managers. You have to, even in the smallest team, you have to worry about your bank accounts, your finances, your legal aspects like trademarks, websites, domain hosting, who's going to build the website, who's going to be responsible for the legal, how do we pay people, right? Do we do 1099s? Are we doing W-2s? Do we have benefits? There's a lot, even at the smallest scale, there's going to be HR overhead. And of course, you have to get on social media. You have to have marketing. So these business aspects are crucial to your success as much as having a great game.
Thanks. Alexei, would you like to expand on that as well, of just from those?
Yeah. So we had two people in our partnership, and I would love to hear about Chris's experience too with multiple people. But we went into it, and since it wasn't just one person, we got a lawyer, a startup lawyer, and we treated it like going into a marriage and talking about like the worst case scenario, talking about the things that we want to focus on, like the business principles, how we want to monetize, and just putting that all on paper and not having any feelings about it, and making sure that we were going into it understanding who gets what and who's responsible for which part of it. And I'm sure that growing into a team of three gets, or four or more, gets much more complicated. Two people, it was easy enough conversations, and working with our lawyer, he put it all on paper. But I would love to hear from Chris too on how you manage that with more people.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
not too many more people. Between the six of us, we each have different disciplines, which leads to a good balance, like a good structure for knowing who's in what lane. But also, pretty much all of us, we each have additional jobs. This is not our full-time gig, because at this point we're pretty advanced in our careers and mostly can't afford to take time off. I took a year off just to focus on the studio, but still, now I went back to teaching. So it is different. At this point, we do have. I am the main founder, so the others are second tier founders. So we do get to allocate like resources and who gets what. But at this point, when you don't have anything to allocate, there's a bit of hoping and waiting as we work toward that goal of finishing our product and getting the funding that we need to finish it up. We're not working on mobile games, so it's as a PC console game in the AA space, it requires a bit more than mobile games. Although mobile games are great because you get to test the waters, use a different market, release in a different market under a different name, test it out, pull it back, make your fixes. So mobile is a different creature, but it's also very interesting, and it's good that you can be flexible to be able to do all those things.
No, that's super interesting, especially coming from the two aspects of mobile and like the PC console games that your company works on. You mentioned investors and funding, and I would like to say, and these things change, and there's different. If people aren't familiar, there's different rounds of investing. There's different types of investors that you might pursue, and Alexia, and I don't know about your total, how you funded your company, but what do you think the most effective ways from an early stage game, a studio? How can they attract investors? How can they, and actually, get the money needed to achieve their goals and their passion?
Yeah, so we were totally anti-investor, but we did have people coming to us, and we had talked about potentially getting investors. I think the best way to do that is to just be involved in the community. I know in Orlando there's Indienomicon, and just bring a demo that you have to various places. We had talked with A16Z, which is Anderson Horowitz, and they were focusing on games and AI. But when you bring on an investor, they take on a lot of like they might have more input into the creative direction of it. So you are taking on a partner that will have say in your creative endeavors. But yeah, just being part of the community and putting yourself out there, getting your demos into Steam Next Fest. We got one of our demos up there, Watchmakers, and just playtesting and making sure it's viable as a game, and then going to investors. They'll just be more willing to fund it, to know that you are able to ship something and get it out there, and they'll get a return on their money.
Yeah, that's the name of the game, right? Getting a return on that money when anybody tries to get, or to invest in you, they want to know what that return is going to be, and to have those numbers. Chris, same question. What do you think good advice would be for funding for early stage investors? Because it gets different as you get bigger and want to grow too. So,
and it depends on your platform as
right.
well.
Okay.
So for us, a seed round is like $2 to $3 million. Then an A series round would be $15 to $20 million. It's not like that for most mobile games. You're looking at seed rounds of $100,000, $200,000, and maybe A rounds of $1 to $2 million. So it's quite a jump. We do have to, yes, we have to have something to show, just the same way. But it just takes us longer, I guess, which can make it a little more challenging. But it's also like taking on an investor is a really important decision, because it's as important for you to find an investor who's a good fit for you as it is for the investor to find a studio that's a good fit for them. Lots of investors don't do PC console, or they don't do free to play, or they don't do mobile. Some only have very small investments, or they only do Series B, later investments. Some are publisher driven, some are project driven. They want money, put money into the project and then get money out of your revenue. Some want to be co-owners in your studio, where they want a percentage of the overall ownership of the studio and all your products. So really have to be very careful about how you accept your money and what you're looking to get out of the investor. Very often it's not just money. Some of them, like A16Z, like Andreessen Horowitz, they can give you a lot of connections. Griffin Gaming Partners, One Up Ventures. There's a lot of them that have good contacts in the game industry that can also help you leverage a good publisher. And a good publisher will also help with marketing, distribution, getting you on platform on Steam and on the Epic Store and so forth. But those platforms are also easier and easier to get on yourself. So balance those things out with your concept of what you want out of an investor, out of a publisher, and what you want to do yourself, so that you can make sure that you retain as much creative control as you can.
Yeah, I think that's key, that creative control, when you're passionate about and doing a labor of love is something that you've trained yourself in, went to school for, and enjoy working on, that you want to maintain that creative control. It's not just a business for a lot of people, and we see that all the time. Every entrepreneur and every person that has started their own business always comes back to some pitfalls that they've encountered. And I'm sure an indie studio is no different. And some of the common pitfalls in this industry are something that you've experienced, and more importantly, how you navigated through them. And Alexi, I'll start with you on that one.
I would say the biggest pitfall, I don't know if it's a pitfall, but just having the dedication and perseverance to continue when it's really hard and you are just working every day and you're not seeing the fruits of your labor. I have found that it's been very beneficial to post on TikTok, like some type of prototype that you have, or just share it with your friends or play test to get that motivation and that dopamine hit to continue forward. I think that there's a long slog of doing a lot of tedious iteration and testing that you just need the push and motivation to get through. Being on larger teams, it's a lot, you have all these people to like keep you motivated and test with them. But when you are a founder of a small studio, it can be lonely. So it is important to go to the Indienomicons, the Glitch Cities in LA, the various like meetups to test out your work early and often so that you can get that energy from other folks.
That makes a lot of sense. Chris?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely, get out there and work with others, see their passion, let that passion help ignite you. It's really hard when it's a slog. My biggest mistake in this particular studio was timing. Like, I quit my great executive job in the game industry and went to DICE and GDC just as the industry collapsed. There was no funding available, and it hit rock bottom very quickly. And so I was kind of stuck, right? I had expected to get funding. I was told by many investors and publishers, sure, if you came a year ago with this team and this pitch, we'd have funded your whole thing. But it's not like that anymore. There's not nearly as many investors active in the game industry, and we're recovering, but there's still a lot of projects that are down, a lot of people that have been laid off. So timing can be a factor, and being persistent is what's going to get you through that time. And stay with it. Just don't give up. If you may learn a lot of things about your project. We pivoted, not in major ways, but in some ways, several times over the course of the last 2.5 years that we've been working on this. Each time we've made our concept and our project better, built better prototypes, had better trailers and playable demos. So it's not unachievable. It's just be prepared to do a lot of work and to fight stubbornly against the frustration that you sometimes will feel, and lean on others. That community is very important. Going to conferences, seeing what's happening at DICE and GDC, or at Gamescom, or any of the other conferences, Even just going to like Comic-Con or PAX, where it's strictly consumer side, and see what people like, what they're having fun at, what they're doing, and bring back that to put it into your game.
That's fantastic, and I think that's great advice. And Lexi, I want to get back to something you mentioned too, but just about the day to day, and whether you're, I think, a small shop or bigger shop when you're starting out, and it can be so much, especially in the beginning. You're constantly putting out fires, you're finding out new things, you're trying to put the infrastructure together, you're worried about funding, you're worried about where you're going to be located, all the ins and outs, and it's hanging over your head. And then the day to day starts with the business, and you're building that kind of like the overnight success that takes a decade, right? Like people hear that, but I think in any creative industry, people face burnout. And what strategies I think have you implemented, or that you've seen in your community and people that you work with and people that you work for, or I mean people that work for you and people that work, in your industry, to maintain somewhat of a healthy work-life balance, and avoid the burnout that you hear about sometimes.
Just be intentional about taking breaks.
Mm.
I always like to remind my students that it's very important to take breaks because that's part of the creative process. Like you do research and then you implement and then you iterate and then you need to take a break to be able to reflect upon the things that you've learned from the work that you've done. And sometimes you need a partner or a friend or a business partner to remind you to take those breaks. But like for our studio, we did 4 days a week, and then our fifth day, the Friday, we would take off so that we had a recharge every week, since we were just implementing me and one other person most weeks. So just instilling it into your habits is really important, and taking, a week off here and there. We have life is short, but there's also time. Like you don't need to get it done immediately.
Okay, great, great. Chris, what do you think about that? About facing burnout and maintaining a healthy lifestyle?
I agree. Taking time, being with your family, being with your friends, in a real physical space, but also sometimes in a digital space. But yeah, those things are all very important. Traveling, taking vacations. Of course, I'm a gamer, right? So I play a lot of games in my spare time. Try to play different kinds of games that are related to the kind of game you're making, games that are different. See what you can learn about them. I've played games that I would never actually want to play if I'd just heard about them, but somebody said, hey, this has a really cool crafting system. You should check this out. And I play the game, and I play it deeply, and I try to learn more of what I can and see if there's anything in there that I might be able to use. But I'm also having fun. It's a good balance. It's what they say is if you enjoy your work, you never work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoy this research. It's the gameplay, but it's fun, and I can bring a lot of that back. And it also recharges me to go, hey, somebody made this game. I can make my game. We'll get it done.
Yeah, I think that's an important attitude to have, and I think that's a deserved confidence and a built-in confidence, that comes off that passion too. I want to go back to vision a little bit too, and creative vision, and you guys mentioned like starting up the funding, and a little bit about getting feedback, but I'm wondering from how each of you have managed feedback from playtesters, from community, negative and positive, or at least constructive, right? While staying true to your vision or the company's vision or mission statement, balancing on that. And Chris, I'll start with you on this one.
So yeah, I've done a lot of play testing and gathering user feedback at other studios. We also did it here, and we actually did it literally here at Full Sail at the UX Lab. We ran play tests last summer of a very early demo build to get player feedback, and it worked out great. Not only did we get really good feedback, but we found the fun loop in the game that wasn't just those of us who were making it that would enjoy it. It was our target audience. It was really useful feedback. So be able to do that, and also uh, things like even if you don't have a playable demo, you can do market studies. We did a Facebook market test, ad test. It's pretty cheap. Like it was like $35. Hit 5,000 people in 3 different U.S. cities with Facebook ads to see if the click-through rate was going to be something acceptable. Right? Typical Facebook ad gets less than 1% of clicks. Really fantastic ones get about 6 or 7%, and we had about 4%. So that told us that, hey, this is interesting to our target audience. We looked at the demographics of those who had clicked on it. It's a good fit. So you can gather data, and that helps you build your confidence in your system. And also, if the fit isn't there, you know that you need to change something, and you can do that very early on. Frequently, let people play and get their feedback. So it's always valuable to have not only the data of demographics, read a lot of industry reports too, and there's a lot of them that come out from different places, Newzoo, Brighter, and other resources, Game Insights, Video Game Insights, that are excellent reports about specific demographics like age ranges and what they play, or the different genders and who plays what, and the growth rates. So gathering the data about your game in specific and about the industry in general can both help you build up what you need to have that product market fit that makes your game successful.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris. And Alexia, before I get into what your thoughts on feedback and play tests in the community, what's your cat's name?
Sorry about my cat. It's Chi-Chi.
I love it. I love it. I love having a cat in a Zoom. I think that's fantastic. So when you're managing the feed, construct, like, how do you do that? And maybe what you learned too from that, like how you used to do it compared to now, and like what you, because I know there's a lot of growth. I know there's a lot of when you've started to where you are now, because that's the story, right? That's the story of how you become a successful business owner and business person. So we just dive in a little bit of that, please.
Yeah, +1 on ads. I had never run ads before I started a company. I never would have done that because I worked with the marketing team at all of the companies that I was at. So they had done it, and they had done focus groups and research beforehand. But I got deeper into ads. Like Chris said, it's only maybe $20 a day, maybe tops like $100 to do a bunch of different experiments. And in the bigger companies, you do like A/B testing once you have more steadfast designs and you can test those out with different cohorts. But yeah, it's cheap to test and cheap to just figure out what your demographics are from that data. And if that aligns with the personas that you've written for your company, if that aligns with the razor statements that you made for your company. We made principles around narrative design and social commentary for our company at large. And then we would make razor statements and principles for each of our games because they had different things that we wanted to get deeper into, not just narrative, but like the theme or mood of the game, or how deep we wanted to get into a certain technology, that sort of thing. But would highly recommend ads on Reddit or YouTube, or we actually had a lot of traction on LinkedIn because we had a corporate satire, which I never would have thought that would be the case on LinkedIn, but it
Interesting.
worked.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I never thought LinkedIn would be like a place like that either. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so I told you guys I would come back to, and you've peppered in throughout about the community, and I really want to think, like, and Alexi, I'll start with you. Why do you believe community is vital for indie developers? And you've alluded to this a couple times, but and maybe strike on more of the importance with it, and how you engage your audience and peers to support that network. Like, what have you done, but to help foster that and nurture that?
For community, as far as Bodeville, we involved the community really early on so that we could test things out really quickly since we had a small, like 2 people team at that point. And usually, like at Niantic, we started out with 12 and we ended up with 60 people on the team. And we always had people, like this larger company, 600 people to test with. So we already had that support system. But we would share on TikTok really early our ugliest stuff. We would share on LinkedIn. We would share on Reddit just to get feedback on like r/destroy my game, so that people would respectfully destroy your game and give critiques.
Mm.
Usually you have these systems already in play at companies. You have a design critique that you go to every week or every month. Um, and then outside of that system for testing and getting people into our Discord, I would just write on Medium and we would write on our Bodeville blog on our website so that we would get more just eyes and visibility and just draw more people into the community via SEO. So once you write on a website or on Medium or something, you just get more people. It's like ads, but you're not paying for them. You are paying for them in time. But yeah, that's how I fostered community and just kept it growing over time.
No, that's great. That's when you're putting yourself out there and you're wanting the feedback, you're wanting the criticism, the constructive, you wanting to find out what am I missing. I think that's what propels any business, and balancing that. Chris, you want to elaborate a little bit?
So I've been involved in community with some ways, like in America's Army, we had large forums, and this is over 20 years ago. And that was our main community resource. Now there's so much more to community than there used to be, because now we have like social media, right? You got to be out there on TikTok and Instagram and whatever, all these things, not just Facebook for us old people, but there's a lot of different channels. Plus, you've got streamers on Twitch, you've got streamers on YouTube, you've got streamers all over the place showing your product if they can get at it. So there's a lot of staging that you have to do. What point are we at in our campaigns? How far out do we want to start? Are we too early? Because if you get too early, then the rise of interest gets lost after a certain amount of time, especially if you might delay your game. There's a lot of things to balance in how you address the community. Like Discord servers are great. That gets a lot of people. But at what point do you want to do that? Like, we haven't announced our game, so we don't want to have that yet. But we do want to continue, as I mentioned, with the play testing and the closed play tests and getting feedback on art studies. So, in the past, like I said, we've used different methods, even been at companies that have used TV ads, right, or banner ads on the websites. The whole industry goes through phases of what is the most effective methods. Esports, right? We look at esports as a very, very big growth medium, but it's really a growth medium for marketing. It's not a profit center. It's a loss center for studios, but it does provide like word of mouth and a lot of interest to players, and it's much more interesting for them to view online in streams. So we do it. So what does your community want? You pretty much have to look at your community, and also always keep in mind that when you get people who are vocal, most of the time they're there to criticize. People, if they're happy with something, they usually just keep their mouth shut and keep playing. Sometimes you get the fanboys, right, who come in and they are super helpful and useful, but most often you'll get criticism. That does not mean that if your your Steam community page is full of criticisms that you have the worst game in the world. It just means that that's where they go to complain, because they have nowhere else to go. I actually at one game, I was also the admin of our one of the admins of our Steam community page, and so I would go on there and actually talk to some of the most vocal critics and say, hey, why? What is it that you don't like? What's the problem with this? This is when we were in early access in Greenlight, and convinced some of them, hey, you could help, instead of just saying, hey, this sucks. And converted them, and they said, "Oh, we understand now. I understand why things are being done this way. I've talked to people. Here's what's being planned. I really like it, and converted them to being our allies and vocal supporters. And they became some of the best people who would help us to grow. So yeah, working with the community is very important, whether it's one-on-one or like with streamers or people who are very vocal, um, or with like a general things like events or planning and having places where a community can meet in Discord and online and other places.
I think that's fascinating that you took a potentially negative experience and turned that around to be positive for you. And I think that shows like what you can do as a business owner, and what you can do to take those comments and when people are expressing their opinions, because you're right, it's kind of like the restaurant model, right? If it's rare that someone goes in and just gives a stellar review, but you will hear all the bad things. It doesn't mean the restaurant is bad. So that's fascinating. So no, there's great great detail about the role of the community and collaboration. I want to talk about a little bit. You know, we've talked about a lot about the ins and outs of the finance, the day-to-day operations, like how do you look for the community, maintaining your creative vision, and maybe get just a little bit more specific. Alexia, like, can you share a story, and not put you totally on the spot, but maybe of a setback or a significant setback at any time where your studio faced, and how you and your partner and now your team, how resilience played a role in that, or how that you actually overcame that?
Yeah, so we have another game called Watchmakers. It is a demo. We it is a puzzle adventure where it's 3D art and it's an small open world. And it's just a demo on Steam, and we got it in for Next Fest. We got some wish lists and we got some traction, but overall, we had been working on it for maybe 5 months or so. And there's a lot of different characters. There's a lot of different like level design and a lot of props in the world and a lot of interactions. And we had built a narrative framework and implemented that from our previous game. But overall, it felt like too much scope for us as 2 to 3 people. We had hired a couple people for the art, but overall, it was just too much for the return that I think we were going to get. And we decided to pivot and move towards, we actually made Grift after that instead. And we just decided to put it on pause and think about it for a couple months while we were working on Grift. And ultimately, we pivoted away from it and decided not to move forward with it because we didn't have the practice of making animations and the resources to make this small open world. So maybe that's not resilience, but we made a business decision to change and move forward into other games. We made another game after that called Garden Walk, but I think it's just important to understand the scope and how many resources you have to put into this, and when the time comes to make the decision of pivoting away from it or keeping going.
There's a lot of wisdom in that, and I think a lot of business owners don't know where that line is, and they stay too long, or they don't pivot to something else or to maintain something. So I think that's very wise and a good lesson to learn, or at least to go through. And Chris, and you talked about pivoting too on things, but maybe a setback that you experienced and how you and your team overcame it through resiliency or another way, right?
Well, we're resilient. 2.5 years and we're still here.
There you go.
But yeah, actually, speaking of pivot, that's exactly what I was thinking of. So our initial concept for the game was very historical related, and about a year into it, we had a game pop up that was kind of not very well marketed, I would say, but it was very similar to what we were planning on doing, but it was already coming out. It was in beta at least, and so we played it in beta, and we decided, wow, this isn't very exciting. What are we going to do? We're not, for one thing, they were first to market, and for another thing, it just wasn't that great. And in fact, I don't think it's around anymore. So we were kind of brainstorming, like, what do we pivot to? Do we pick a different theme? Do we pick a different scope? To start all over from scratch? And from, of all places, a person who is very much not a gamer, my wife, said, well, why don't you mix it with some fantasy? Everybody likes fantasy games. And we tried that, and it turned out to be fantastic. The fantasy gave us the creative license to do anything we wanted in the game, but we kept the original historical setting as a mashup of themes, and that was 10 times better than the original plan for sure. And rather than being just a typical, ordinary, generic fantasy theme, we were able to make it completely different. And so that pivot really worked for us. After that, we built a new demo, went back to conferences, DICE and GDC and so forth, and got really great feedback from investors and publishers. Of course, they still want us to finish Vertical Slice on our own, but at least we know we're headed the right direction. And that was what we play tested here, as I mentioned earlier, and did the market study on, and determined that product market fit was perfect with our target audience. So that gave us the kind of impetus that we needed to continue and be persistent and hold on to our vision, which we'll do until completion.
Great. What a great story. We have about a minute left before we get into the Q&A section, but I wanted to get one more from you guys. And Alexia, what's one piece of advice you would give for someone to start their own indie game studio? Can you be quick? I'm just joking. But like one little small piece of advice, and Chris will ask you the same thing.
Scope down. That's it.
Yeah?
Just if you think something is the right scope, you probably need to cut some stuff and just focus on the core game loop and get that really solid, and be ruthless about cutting the scope and testing with people. Great.
Chris?
Just do it. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't worry about the money, because you're going to probably fail the first few times. Things will change. Just hang in there and do it. That's all. Just don't lose your excitement and passion. Don't quit.
Right. Resiliency. I think that's a common theme in this podcast. Well, we do have some great questions from our audience here. I want to start with the first one. What are the standards we need to have when looking for investors, for not only for our own business to thrive, but for investors to gain good faith in our business? And Chris, you want to take that one?
So definitely talk to your investors. Don't just say, somebody says, okay, sure, here's some money, sign this form, take the money. Talk to them. What do they really want out of it? When are they looking to get money? Some investors are on only like a 5 to 7 year cycle, or maybe they want money back in 3 years. A lot of investors are looking for 10 to 100 times their return on investment, but they know that most of their investments are going to fail. It's like movies, right? 19 out of 20 movies don't make money, but the 20th one is such a blockbuster, it pays for all the other 19 plus. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for those blockbusters, and you have to kind of show why you're going to be that. But you also have to look and see what they offer, what they can give you. Do they have connections in the industry? Have they done this before? Sometimes they haven't, right? Sometimes they're in a totally different market sector, or it's just an angel investor, or even somebody from another nation investment, right? A national level investment from another place, like Saudis are well known for that at this point. If they're willing to keep their hands off, that's a benefit too. They're not giving you anything, but if they don't want any creative control, you still can really run your own ship. So I would say look for those things, and look at the investments that the investor has already done. Are they successful? Can you talk to their leaders? Can you connect with them on LinkedIn and say, hey, we're looking at this investor. What was your experience with them? So dig into the details. They're going to be digging into your details. So dig into theirs. Make sure it's a good fit. This is like worse than a marriage, because you're investing your future, they're investing their money, and you both need to be stuck together for many years until it's very successful. So yeah, make sure it's going to work for you.
Great. Great. Okay. Alexia, question for you. What is your current opinion on what is happening in the industry? Question mark. Um, just an example of Romeo's games, and what is your strategy to get studios to work and not in at the edge of bankruptcy? What is your strategy not to have them like, I guess week to week, month to month looking at that? So,
I think they meant Romero's games.
oh, I just say Romeo's.
It says Romeo's, but I think John Romero's game was just his studio was just
Ah, okay. See, I'm a novice, so I didn't even catch that.
defunded by Microsoft because Microsoft had a bunch of problems.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, the industry is tumultuous right now. Think that there's usually downturns in the industries, and we have to be resilient. Sorry, my cat is now on my desk. Apologize. Um, I would just say that you do need to be resilient. I think you need to think about where you're taking money from, how much potential runway they have. And also, I think just to add on to Chris's experience, just make sure you get a lawyer. There's one in Orlando. His name is John Laster. I've been using him for a while, but there's many different funds that you can get money from. So you could get angel investors or I think SAFE is another one, and they all have different types of returns and stipulations. So just make sure that you get a lawyer. As far as just the industry, I think that they're shedding a lot of employees just um, because they grew so large during COVID, and we just need to continue on. And I hope that there will be a lot more startups because people need to do their own thing and make some money. And I'm hoping that this causes a lot of growth in the industry for us.
Great. Great. Um, I'm just going to go back and forth here. Chris, in terms of getting others to help with waiting on funding, what disciplines, positions are the most desirable, I guess, desirable and difficult to fill? Maybe start with desirable, like what do you need first? And we'll get into the difficulty of fulfilling some of those other positions.
Well, when you're small, you don't really need full-time HR people and full-time lawyers and full-time accountants. You're going to outsource as much as you can of that, or do it yourself in many cases. What you really need are the people who build. You're the architect. What you need are the carpenters and the electricians and the plumbers. So engineers, artists, designers. Maybe you're doing the design yourself. Maybe you're even doing some of the engineering and art yourself. But at some point, you're either going to have to hire or more likely outsource to people on a 1099 or a contract basis to get some additional work in house. Some things you could potentially leverage AI for. Like for us, we use that for concept art quite a bit, and it's been very effective. But yeah, for engineering, for like 3D modeling, and for systems design, you really need to have some people in there that know what they're doing. So I would say those would be the hardest things to fill. There are some specialty areas too that you're going to need that people don't often think about, but those are usually done again on a contract basis as needed, like audio engineers, narrative designers, and roles like that where they can come in and do the job and then get out. Whereas some things like engineers and artists and designers you may want to keep on more long term. In that case, you may think about doing W-2s instead of 1099s because 1099s are going to be more expensive, but W-2s, of course, then you start having to think about benefits and some other tax implications.
All right. Alexia, do you follow a specific method for managing risk when designing the core systems of your games? Or do you prefer to adapt as you go and cut features if they seem too risky later on? Okay, I see. I see what they're asking.
I like to follow an additive design process where
Hmm.
we start with the core game loop based on some prototypes that we've made and just testing that we've done, and then add features from there. I think I've encountered people, I mean, both ways are right, and can be done. I've encountered some people who like to design everything on paper and then cut away from it, and that's a subtractive design process. I personally like to follow just where the playtesters are having fun and leaning into that and adding new systems on top of it and new content. And sometimes you might add things that you never planned and adapting to, what the market wants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because I'm
Sure.
actually subtractive.
Ah.
Like I like to throw in all the features into a bucket, and then we try to pick out the ones that we want to do from there. Reduce it down to the core loop. But we want to kind of see all the features first, so that we know what's the maximum like out of scope area, and then be reductive instead. So it's cool. Either way works, right? Um,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Chris, too, you mentioned the 1099s and
mhm.
getting, you don't, when you're small, you don't need the HR department lawyer. But at what point would you recommend getting a lawyer? This person asked, I'm a solo designer publishing on Stream or Twitch, probably. Is that what they meant? Twitch. Would you still recommend,
Itch.io.
okay. Are you still recommending getting one? Like, would you recommend them getting one? And at what point would you get one?
Like everything else, it depends. It depends on your experience and what you can do. I did all my own trademark registrations, both domestic and international. I did set up my own business and my own bank accounts and do my own accounting. However, um, if you're once you start doing things like with contracts, well before you have an investor, you need to have a lawyer at least that you can talk to regularly. Um, uh, I have a lawyer here in Orlando. She's quite an expert, been working for some very major companies, and she's not only a gamer, but she specializes in game law and IP. So IP is very important for, of course, for games, to protect your own IP and make sure you're not stepping on anybody else's IP. Um, so I would say before you start doing anything that makes money, you definitely have to have a lawyer at least that you've consulted with, that you've talked to and had some relationship with, and that you've been able to potentially give them a retainer fee so that they will come in and help you as needed.
I think that's good advice for any business,
Right?
any business, especially something that you're passionate about and that you want to succeed, not just something that this is your baby. This is something that you want to protect. And so, yes, I think that is correct. Alexia, what was the moment you knew you were ready to start your own studio? And what held you back before that?
I so I had always wanted to work at Niantic, and I got my master's degree in augmented reality location-based games. So I was offered the Niantic gig. I had actually quit Meta the first time. I'm at Meta now, but I had quit and I had wanted to start my own thing. But then Niantic came knocking, so I was like, I gotta do that. So I did that, and I met my business partner there, and he had left to have his third child. And then we had talked about it over time after he had left, and it was just time. I just felt like I had the runway to do it as a bootstrapper, and had looked at my finances pretty acutely and felt like it was the right time. I had the right person. He is a server engineer, and then I was doing the design and art. So it was a very good team because we had complementary skills and we worked really well together. We had already worked together for 2 years. So it was just time.
And I think that's important when you're bootstrapping too. And Chris, you spoke about the timeliness of things. And there's an old adage, it may not be the right time, but that's now. It could be the right time later, and you just got to find that the right path. That's one of I think is a big struggle, big challenge, and a big decision that I think a lot of entrepreneurs and people that start businesses have to go through. So. Um, This is a question kind of taking us back to our first section. How do you keep your creative vision intact when budgets, timeliness, team dynamics, everything that business owners face start pulling you in different directions? Chris?
So when I started doing this, I was thinking like, okay, I'm the designer, right? I'm going to design this game. This is going to be awesome. I love this. That's not what a CEO does. That is not your job. And I've told other CEOs this when I worked for them. Like, hey, if you want to be involved in the game, just make somebody else in charge and come work on the game. But don't try to do both. You can't do both really, really well. You have to do both at some point, right? At the beginning when you're small, but there's tons and tons of great books. I've taken courses on being a CEO because I was to make sure I was doing it right. And really, there's hardly a few things that you need to focus on. That's your company culture, your company people, and your revenue. That's it, right? People, money, and culture. And everything else is somebody else's job. And you should be delegating as much as you can of that stuff, or hiring it out to other people. If you have to do it all yourself, yeah, that's part of the struggle, right? Part of the growth phase, doing all those things. But when you can, you pass them off to somebody else. And as far as keeping your creative vision goes, don't think of it as your creative vision. This is not you. This is not about you. It's not like my game is not about me. My game is about the players. If I have to make changes because something sucks in it, that's fine. If somebody inside the studio says, "Hey, I have a cool idea. We should add this into the game," we talk about it. Hey, can we do that? That might be really cool. We've added plenty of things that way. So doing things differently, it's not about necessarily having the vision that you maintain and have to stick to. It's about what's your overall goal. You want to make a game that makes people happy, that is fun, that is profitable, that lets you build more games. If that's your goal, you're going to do fine. If you say, I have to make a game about a frog that jumps across traffic and gets to the other side, well, it's been done. So maybe that's not the best idea. So don't stick to your original idea just because it was your original idea. Be flexible. That's it.
I think that's a great place to wrap this. I want to thank everyone who has joined us today on this great episode of Taking Flight. I have learned so much, and it's great to hear about people that are running their own business, some of the pitfalls they've gone through, all their visions and everything. And I really want to thank you, Alexia, for joining us and taking time out of your day. I really appreciate that. Chris, thanks for being in studio. And everyone, have a great day.